So Rachel has zero knowledge whatsoever. When we talk to her, is that what she's going to tell us?
Mm-hmm.
She has no idea.
She has no clue.
You recognize that?
That's her writing.
Right. That's Rachel's writings, right?
Mm-hmm.
She says, I wish sometimes that I could avoid the future. It's sad when I realize how my father will pass on in the next 2 months, and how Sean, my brother, will move on shortly after. Also, I get to have Dad's car when he's gone. So why don't you tell me?
I know Rachel didn't want her to die at home.
Why not?
Because after Sean died, we had kind of like a ghost experience.
So it was Rachel's idea to take her to the hospital. So you still want her to die then? Yeah.
Diane Staudte had a peculiarly close relationship with her daughter Rachel, exposed for poisoning Rachel's father and siblings with antifreeze. Diane vows that her daughter was neither an accomplice nor a target. Rachel was spared simply because Diane loved her above all else. When investigators first speak with Rachel hours after Diane's arrest, they're oblivious to the fact that Rachel has worked hand in hand with her mother to annihilate the rest of the Staude family. As far as Detective Kevin Shipley is concerned, not only is Rachel grieving the loss of her father Mark and brother Sean, she's about to learn her mother murdered them. In light of this, Shipley must treat her with the care and sensitivity he would show to any victim.
Basically, what I kind of want to discuss with you a little bit, real quick, is just, I know that I know your sister Sarah's in the hospital and they're trying to figure out, what's wrong with her. And from what I heard today, in the last couple of days, I guess her condition's improved quite a bit, mm-hmm. and she's been moved, I think, to another room, and she's talking, I think, is that right now? Mm-hmm. And she's definitely better than she was a couple of days ago, obviously. And they're still trying to figure out what actually happened to her, what's wrong with her. And I know that your father passed. When was it when he passed away?
Sometime like last April.
Last April of last year.
Yeah.
Was he ill for a long time, or what all do you really know about that situation as far as his death goes? I know he died at home, right? Is that right? Okay. What all do you know about his death as far as what did your mom tell you, or what was your knowledge of it?
Though Rachel doesn't yet know her mother confessed, Shipley's first talking point must trigger alarm bells. She was invited to the Springfield, Missouri police station to discuss the mysterious illness that nearly killed her elder sister Sarah. Yet Shipley is more interested in the death of her father more than a year earlier. This makes Rachel wary enough to downplay the friction between her parents and any animosity she herself felt towards Mark.
Your mom take it pretty bad with his death, or does she hide emotion well, or, how would you describe her?
In public she can, but at home it's...
At home it's different? At home?
It's very different at home.
Okay. What does she do at home that kind of shows her emotion? Just crying or talking about it?
Crying. We talked about it a lot.
About your dad, your father?
Yeah.
As far as a dad goes, a pretty good dad to you and everybody, or what's your opinion? He was nice with
us.
Well, with
you
guys,
he'd let us go to it.
Oh, you guys could do anything you wanted to do. What was mom and dad's relationship like?
They would fight a little.
Did they fight a little bit more than like any other married couple, or
not really?
Okay. Were they close?
I think so.
You think they were close, but they did have disagreements and stuff?
Once in a while.
Did he work or anything?
He would try, but he wouldn't be able to keep it that long.
He couldn't keep a job very long. And your mom's a nurse, right?
Yeah.
She okay. So what were most of their arguments over? Just
money,
like everybody else. Money and not getting a job. Did they have arguments over anything else besides the money? Drugs, drinking, running around, not being at home, any of that kind of stuff.
Sometimes.
What on all those topics, or just?
Because he did have some friends that Mom thought he did things with.
Like what? Like drinking?
Drinking, smoking.
Smoking.
Shipley wants to verify the domestic abuse alleged in Diane's confession. Though Rachel plays along, admitting how and why her parents fought, it's obvious she and Diane haven't rehearsed a story they'd stick to should they be caught. Diane portrayed Mark as a neglectful alcoholic and drug addict who physically abused both her and the children. There's barely a shadow of this violence in Rachel's account, and there'll be similar contradictions when it comes to the eldest Staude sibling, Sean.
What about your brother? I know he passed, was it last year? So your dad passed in like spring of last year, and then your brother died in the fall of last year.
Yeah.
How old was your brother?
Let's see, that'd be 2 years above Sarah, so 26?
26. And his name was Sean?
Like that. Sean, yeah.
What, was he living at home?
Yeah.
Had he been living at home all the time?
Yeah.
So he's never moved out on his own at 26?
No, we were attempting to do an assisted living thing, but it never panned out.
What was wrong with him? Did he have some kind of physical disabilities? Or?
Autism. He had a seizure disorder thing.
Okay. So you're trying to get some kind of assisted living, because that's a lot to have to care for a person, especially when they get to an adult age and have to care for them all the time. So he couldn't work, I assume, then?
He did do Springfield workshop for a time, but he was having some, not behavioral problem, but just some issue with coworkers. Was your mom pretty much the caregiver for him then, I assume? Yeah. All the time? Okay. Did she handle that pretty well? I mean, did she take it hard, or was it a strain on her? Or did you see it as a strain on her? Or? The taking care of him part? I mean, was it? He was extremely low maintenance. Well, he was low maintenance. He wasn't. He didn't. I mean, you get him some comic books, some puzzle books. He is a happy camper. He was happy. Okay, so it wasn't a constant having to keep him happy or do things for him. He kind of would just hang out on his own. He had this awesome trick that with a pencil. It's like I wish I could figure out how he'd do that. He would twist them in his hands. And it's like, for somebody who can't button buttons, that is awesome. That's pretty neat. Some of the things that people with autism can do. They can't do the simple things, but they can do all these extraordinary things sometimes. And you see that a lot.
Rachel explains Sean was unemployed because he was easily frazzled, a reactive quality that he can't necessarily help. This is in contrast to willful disobedience or proactive behavior where Sean is at fault. Considering Diane labeled Sean worse than a pest, it's fair to say her daughter's testimony doesn't match up. But again, Rachel doesn't know Diane has been arrested, so her goal is to conceal any facet of the Staude household that warrants scrutiny. To this end, she'll continue minimizing Diane's contempt for her other children, unwittingly revealing Rachel's own resentment towards Sarah.
He was sick for 3 or 4 days, throwing up, and then he died. Do you know any of the circumstances behind that? What were they telling you guys was the reasoning? Or did he have a seizure too? Or I want to say it was a seizure. Seizure. I can't remember exactly. Okay. Because medical things are just... Yeah, me too. They're over my head. So obviously Mom had to take that, pretty hard too. First Dad, and then a short time later, it's your brother. How did she seem to handle that? I can only imagine, but... She wishes there was more she could have done. Yeah. She's told me, when we talk at night, it's like she feels like a failure as a mom. Because it's it's one thing to lose your dad or husband. Right, yeah. Your dad, her husband, yeah. But with a kid, it's... She took that take that rougher than her husband? Very rough. Yeah, I could see that. So she was faulting herself she assumed it was because she should have been a better mother? Or something. So she was kind of taking a lot of the blame upon herself for him dying. What has Mom said about your sister's condition? Obviously she's feeling like she's a failure as a parent over your sister being ill too, or is that a wholly different deal? Lately she's been wondering, could we gotten her to the hospital faster. So you guys actually took her to the hospital? Yeah, because we were able to get there in time, because I was helping her put her in the car because she would not wake up. Who decided to take her to the hospital, your mom or you or both of you? Joint decision. Because she wouldn't wake up? We need to get something because... Okay. Did she just graduate from Missouri State? Yeah. Back in when? Back in the spring? Fall. Fall? Oh, okay, back in the fall. So she's been living at home too while she's been going to school?
Yeah.
Okay. Is she working anywhere right now? Or?
No, she's been looking for something.
Looking very hard or?
No.
Not really? What's her degree in?
French.
French?
French.
It'd be kind of hard to, well, I guess you could be a teacher, I guess, French teacher, but other than that, French in Springfield probably be a little tough, but
I know, because I know in high school we had mostly Spanish. So.
Yeah, I can see Spanish, but maybe she's going to teach French or something. But she's pretty much been goofing off, you say, then? Not really?
Oh, yeah, because every time I'd go back in the room, she'd be on the computer, YouTube, and it's like, come on. At least go clean the litter box.
Yeah, something, yeah. Just kind of just being there, not doing anything, huh? Does she have school bills? I mean, she had to have school stuff coming. Is she already paying on that, or is that coming up? Or
it's coming up.
It's coming up. So she had to be thinking, I need to get a job to pay. What was she saying?
I was going to try to help her get something at like Hy-Vee or something. Yeah. It's like, at least you'll have something to pay.
Was she not real interested in it at all?
No, she just wants to like sit around. It's like,
just hang out.
Oh.
What was Mom's attitude about that?
Frustrated, but she's a bit more patient on that than I am.
Yeah.
You know, it's like.
Okay. So she was frustrated with her, but were they arguing about that or anything? Or
no.
Not a whole lot. At least around you anyway, you didn't see arguments or Mom getting on her about getting a job. Was Mom trying to get her to get a job though?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, she'd bring it up in conversations like, your bill's coming up.
Yeah. And she just, whatever.
Okay.
Just wanted to hang out. That was about it, huh? Okay.
This may seem like typical sibling drama, but Rachel comes across uncaring, even cruel for dwelling on something as petty as cat litter, while her sister lies dying in a hospital bed.
Well, anyway, we got to looking into this situation further and obviously doing our own investigation over the last 4 or 5 days and looking into some stuff. And today, there's more ongoing testing, obviously, and there's going to be some more ongoing testing. But we felt at this point that it was time to have a talk with your mom. After talking to her for a while, she finally told us what she had been doing. She had been giving your father small doses of antifreeze in his drinks over several day period. Same thing with your brother. And same thing with your sister, Sarah. I know it's very difficult, and obviously we don't think that you or your sister had any knowledge, obviously, of that. Your mom is obviously she's torn up over the whole thing, and mentally she's beat herself up over it, I'm sure, every day. And like you even said, she's an emotional wreck at home.
Shocked silence and repressed sobs are certainly fair reactions to learning your mother dearest is a serial murderer. Rachel won't properly break down until her audience leaves the room, suggesting these emotions aren't just for show.
Dear God.
These tears aren't shed over Mark, Sean, or Sarah. Amongst all this death, losing her mother to the justice system is the only thing that sparks Rachel's grief. Anxiety over her own involvement also wreaks havoc on her mind, though Shipley's summary of the case cements his lack of suspicion. These are details that only the culprit could know. Details that could be used to implicate Rachel had Shipley not revealed his hand. Fortunately, whatever ground is lost here will be regained by a discovery in the Staude residence, an entry in Rachel's diary from June 2011, hinting that she knew Mark and Sean would die months in advance. Lead investigator Detective Neal McAmis is armed with this revelation when he interviews Rachel the following day. She faces a more prepared and strategic opponent this time, and McAmis will systematically eliminate her avenues for denial.
Hey, Rachel.
Hi.
Can I get you to switch with me?
Okay.
And I'll sit there. Thank you. Got some water. You okay? Do you need anything else?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you being willing to come down and speak with me. Just kind of have a few more questions for you. Have you thought about anything, since yesterday, anything that you could think of? I know you spoke to Detective Shipley yesterday. Is there anything at all today that...
Not really. mean, I tried to give as much as I could.
Okay. Did you ever have any suspicions about anything when your dad and brother and sister got sick?
In hindsight now, yeah. I mean, now that I think on it, yes, but God. It's hard to even imagine something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If there was, I'd really hit it well. It's just hard to think that somebody would do that, so it makes sense now, but God, didn't even think about that then.
For all the drivel coming out of Rachel's mouth, she hasn't answered the question. Everything seems so obvious to her now, yet she lacks specific examples of what was so suspicious in hindsight. Her shock is artificial, so there's no substance behind it to offer McAmis.
Okay. Kind of tell me about the deal with your dad. How did everything happen with that? So he
really
was
sudden.
Okay, so he was pretty much fine, and then you say then all of a sudden he gets sick. He didn't want to eat. And then he started throwing up. Was he throwing up for 3 or 4 days?
Just about. It wasn't very long, though.
When you say it wasn't very long, what do you mean?
Like 3 or 4 days. Like, when I get sick, usually I'm out for like a week throwing up. I know, it's a bit weird to think about it in terms of me versus how others get sick, but to me, 3 or 4 days is not that long. But
Rachel concedes this comparison is self-centered, showing McAmis she isn't egocentric at heart. Her self-aware tone signals that she thought hard on the situation and her place within it, much like an innocent person seeking the truth.
And so obviously he's in pretty bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody ever say anything about taking him to the hospital or calling an ambulance or anything since he was doing so bad?
No.
Nothing was ever mentioned about that?
No.
What kind of beverages did your dad like to drink?
He liked Coke.
Coke?
Regular Coke.
Regular Coke? Anything else?
Sprite too.
Sprite? What about other types of drinks?
He liked vodka.
Okay.
Especially rum and Coke. Rum and Coke was really nice as well.
Okay.
Because every time we went out to a bar, he would get rum and Coke.
Okay. Anything else that you can think of that he liked to drink a lot?
Not really.
Not really.
Like mother, like daughter. Just as Diane dodged the topic of Mark and Sean's deaths, Rachel lists every drink in the household except Gatorade, the one used to poison Mark. She can't appear too knowledgeable, so McAmis brings it up himself to assess her reaction.
Did he ever drink like sports drinks or anything like that?
Yeah, we did have Gatorade in the house for a while.
For a while?
Because Brianna loves Gatorade.
Okay, Brianna loves Gatorade. Did your dad drink Gatorade?
Yeah.
So that was one thing that he liked?
Yeah.
So when he died, were you surprised? I mean, that
extremely. I mean, he wasn't even like 60-something, not even up there at an age where it would be something that would be expected. Okay. So.
And you said he was in pretty good health then for the most part, and then all of a sudden he gets sick and completely unexpected, like you said, that he would die at that age.
Yeah.
Okay. How about your brother? How long was he sick?
Not that long, like less than a week.
Okay. Less than a week, and okay, during that time period, did he, like I asked about your dad, did he get progressively worse, or was he just kind of at one level, or did he get better and then get worse, or how did
his was more of a steady
downhill, or steady? Okay.
Steady downhill.
So it started to get gradually worse and worse and worse with him. Was there ever any mention of taking him to the hospital or calling an ambulance for him, or?
No.
No? Nothing? Your mom or nobody else said anything about that? No?
You'll recall that McAmis just asked this same question about taking Mark to the hospital. It's interesting that Rachel doesn't take the chance to play up her own virtue, perhaps by claiming she tried to save Mark and Sean, but they refused her help. But for McAmis, the interesting part is that these answers suggest Rachel, despite being aware of the poisoning, made no effort to stop it. Her tune will change on this note when it comes to Sarah.
What did your brother like to drink?
He liked Sprite. What flavor Gatorade was that? It was a cherry or something. One of the red ones.
Okay.
Punch, that was what it was.
Anything else that he liked?
He was one that pretty much you give him any drink, okay.
Okay, so whatever drink you gave him, he was going to drink.
Yeah, okay. Although alcohol's mine. He can't have it.
All right. Did he drink Coke then, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, he drank Coke, okay. And Sprite and Gatorade? And,
yeah.
Okay, so just like you said, pretty much whatever you give him, he would drink?
Yeah.
Okay. Then tell me about Sarah. How did Sarah's illness come about?
Well, the bathroom in our new house is like right across from my room. So anytime she was up at night to go throw up, I could hear it. And it's like, that's when I'd found out that she was sick. Because like, it was very, very sudden too.
So hers was very sudden.
All of a sudden throwing up, and then she didn't want to move either. I couldn't get her like to go back into bed. She just wanted to lie on the floor.
And what were you thinking at that point?
Oh God, another one.
Okay. So
and it scared me to death. It's like I really wanted to call ambulance on this one. I really didn't want to see another.
So why didn't you guys call an ambulance?
I don't know. I thought they were just like flu or something for the other ones, but I don't know. There's something about 3 in a row. I was like, ugh.
And finally, at what point was it? Because if I understand right, you and your mom took her to the hospital, is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so what made you guys decide? How did it come about where you guys said, hey, we're taking her to the hospital?
It was basically a decision met, and so I basically wanted to find a way to get her there. So I had to help get her in the car. Oh, as far as like how the decision was made to call an ambulance, or
you guys took her to the hospital, right?
Yeah.
What because like with your dad and brother, they were just kind of left there. So with your sister, you said she'd been sick for 3 or 4 days, and you said it was real bad where she wouldn't even move. She would just lay on the floor and throw up. At what point was it when you guys finally said, was she just getting worse and worse and worse?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what point did you guys finally say, okay, we're taking her to the hospital? What made you guys decide to do that?
She did not want to get up. She wasn't moving. She wasn't reacting.
Completely.
I tried to shake her. I tried everything, and she just wouldn't get up, wouldn't talk.
And so who decided to take her to the hospital?
I did.
You did? And
yeah.
What did you say? Did you say something to your mom, or?
Yeah.
What did you tell her?
We need to get her help.
What did she
This
say?
Is more than flu, more than sick. And she said, okay.
Diane claimed she and Rachel jointly decided to go to the hospital. Though Rachel isn't desperate enough to throw her mother to the wolves entirely, she will take sole credit for actions that bolster her innocence.
So she obviously didn't OD on.
No.
Had Sarah ever mentioned anything, or your brother or your dad had they ever mentioned anything about wanting to harm themselves?
Dad had once told me when he was driving us all in the car, he'd thought about driving the car into a lake. But that had been like several months before that. Sean never really would say anything like, back when he used to work in Springfield Workshop, he would just say things But I want to say that was more like to get your attention. Sarah, not really.
Okay. So nothing that you were ever really concerned about with them, okay? So you never thought they were going to harm themselves or anything like that? Okay.
By dismissing the idea Mark or Sean wanted to end their own lives, Rachel undermines one of her options to explain the diary entry. She can no longer claim she anticipated their deaths because of their failing mental health. Keep an eye out as McAmis blocks every path she has to refute the diary.
Once you found out, when Detective Shipley told you yesterday about what your mom did, what do you think about that?
Confusion, shock. I mean, that's... Nobody expects to have somebody that they know do that. A bit scared of who would be next. I mean, who judges who can live?
If Rachel's dry sniffs weren't enough to give away her performance, her generic phrasing seals the deal. There's a vast difference between somebody you know and your own mother being a killer, especially considering Rachel and Diane's closeness. This disconnected wording is a laughable imitation of what Rachel imagines an innocent person would say.
You and her?
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like you and her, and from talking to her, that you and her were pretty good buddies. Is that right? You guys were real close. Almost best friend, kind of. Mm-hmm. She seems like, because she talked about you with a great deal of love and affection, and so that's fair and accurate then. So she would confide in you and tell you things about how frustrated she was with everybody else, and she made comments to you that she just had to get out of there and things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Did she ever mention anything at all to you about her intent or plan or idea or anything at all to harm any of your dad or your brother or sister?
No, but she's talked about hurting herself.
Okay.
I mean, she's told me once that if it weren't for everybody else in the house, she would off herself.
Mm-hmm. Did she say how she would do that?
Not specifically. No.
Okay. Did she give any kind of mention at all, or give any, like, I might do this or I might do that, or anything at all like that?
We had a book on poisonous plants. I mean, it was arranged in a really funny way. But we would, for some reason, she would always be looking at the nightshade pages. I mean, she would talk about cyanide. Other than that...
Rachel makes uneasy observations about Diane to deflect McAmis's focus away from their bond. Failing to criticize Diane would invite questions about why Rachel is standing by a murderer.
She ever talk about anything else along those lines?
No.
So she never told you specifically that she wanted to hurt your dad, your brother, or your sister?
No.
Did she ever say anything to you about maybe any of them being in bad health and that they were going to die in the near future or anything at all like that?
Yeah.
She did?
Like, as far as, like, Dad, when he was smoking and drinking, it's like if he keeps up on this, he's not going to be around to make 80, 90.
Okay. Anything else, or was that pretty much?
That's pretty much it.
Never anything about your brother or Sarah?
No.
Okay.
McAmis repeatedly confirms that Mark, Sean, and Sarah were all relatively healthy before their sudden illness, and therefore that Rachel couldn't have predicted their deaths. He wants this constraint fresh in her mind as he ramps up to a confrontation and takes one final step to corner his suspect. McAmis presents Rachel with a banal diary entry, confirming she's the author before her guard is raised by her own guilty words.
Do you recognize this?
Yeah, I remember this.
Okay. What is that?
Little journal thing.
A journal thing? Whose journal?
Mine.
Your journal? So you wrote this then, is what you're telling me? Okay. You remember writing this then, is what you're saying? Okay. Take a look at this. Is that your same journal that we were just talking about that you were writing?
There was a dream that I had that they would die, but
This is your journal?
yeah.
You wrote this? And you remember writing it?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you get to read it all? Got some questions for you, Rachel.
Okay.
Some questions that you need to be honest with me about.
Against all odds, this ludicrous answer is corroborated by Diane's confession. But McAmis doesn't have much faith in Diane's integrity, or prophetic dreams for that matter. So this excuse won't curb Rachel's Miranda warning.
I gotta read you this real quick. Okay? You've never been in trouble, right? Okay. These are just Miranda rights that I'm gonna explain to you, and then we'll continue talking about this. Okay. Now, Rachel, we need to talk about this, and again, I appreciate you being truthful with me, what we just talked about, but you're going to have to continue to be truthful with me. Are we understood? So you said you'd been having some dreams about them dying, and you told your mother about this. What did you tell your mother?
That it would be quick. That it'd be easy. That they'd be to heaven soon and we could move on. I didn't know when she bought the antifreeze, but I knew she'd been doctoring drinks.
Rachel quickly gives up on pretending she knew nothing, but maintains she didn't support or participate in her mother's scheme.
Rachel, whose idea was this?
Mom brought it up, and we discussed, but...
So you and Mom are close enough. You guys are, just like we talked about earlier, you guys are best, close enough friends and, mother-daughter that you guys have a tight enough bond that you guys could discuss this. And she was the one to bring it up?
Yeah.
What did she say to you?
Basically went through different options. Was trying to find things that wouldn't be traceable, or at least would be hard to trace if you didn't know what you were looking for. I remember her searching online, though. I remember.
What kind of searches did she do for that?
A lot of Google search, a lot of, she mentioned once how to kill characters, like if you're writing stories, you could actually look up something like that, and she'd get ideas from it.
Did you guys do these searches together?
No, she'd happened to mention it.
So she told you that she was doing these searches?
Yeah.
So when she told you this, what did you say?
Other than it was disturbing and kind of creepy, don't know, I was quite uncomfortable with it,
Well, obviously, Rachel, you guys got to the point where something was agreed upon. Why did you guys want to kill them?
Sean, I accepted that she wanted him gone, but I really didn't. think he was necessary. And I really actually wasn't aware that she was getting Sarah. I knew about Sean, I knew about Dad, but I didn't know she was going to go ahead with Sarah.
Did Sarah know what was going to happen to your dad and your brother?
Probably not.
Probably not.
No.
Or probably so. What did I say about let's be honest about everything and get it out on the table? Because again, you've already seen I've spoken with your mother this morning, so you need to be honest about everything.
It's very possible she could have overheard.
This question may seem out of place, but remember that Rachel said no one sought help for Mark or Sean, including Sarah. Rachel isn't eager to throw her sister under the bus just yet, and plays it safe with a vague answer. But as we'll soon see, her ignorant facade doesn't hold up against McAmis's elaborate tactic of asking the same question twice.
Because again, you've already seen I've spoken with your mother this morning, so you need to be honest about everything.
It's very possible she could have overheard.
Did Sarah know, yes or no?
Yes. Dad and then Sean.
Dad and then Sean. And you said you guys did research on the internet on types of poisons that could not be detectable if you weren't looking for them, or they would be difficult to find. Mm-hmm. And you talked about poisonous plants and cyanide. Mm-hmm. What else? Mm-hmm. Did you do any searches?
No.
We have your computer. What are we going to find on your computer? You need to be honest about everything.
Okay.
I want to sit here and be decent with you. You got to tell me everything, though. Okay? We're going to find it. It's better for you to... This is your chance, Rachel. Some mistakes were made, obviously. You guys didn't make the best decisions. But we're here now, and now's the time to deal with it. Okay. Because there's stuff that we already know. There's stuff that we're going to know. There's stuff we need to know, and we need to get this all done right now.
Okay.
What kind of searches did you do?
Death-related in general.
Death-related in general.
Specifically, I can't remember, but if you pull up the thing, I'll remember, because I can't remember specifically.
Okay, but in death in general, I mean, what does that mean?
How to kill someone.
How to kill someone. Okay, so when you're looking up how to kill someone, what did you come up with?
Tylenol, suffocation. I can't remember exactly. There's a lot of browsing.
In fact, Rachel and Diane did a lot of browsing. Amongst queries for shabby chic curtains, Christian sheet music, nautical purses, and funny cats, the pair used a shared laptop to search for fatal essential oils, herbs that cause stroke, and where to purchase rat poison. They often relied on this laptop to convert milliliters to ounces. And in the days following Mark's death, they were already researching lethal doses for adults weighing 48 kilograms. Sean's remains weighed 47 kilograms.
When the antifreeze gets there, how do you guys go about administering it?
Let's see. Mom would... I think she got some containers that she would do I don't know if it was turkey baster or whatnot, but to take it from one container into another container, hide it in the house, and then when she would buy drinks, would doctor them.
And when you say doctor the drinks, what do you mean by that?
Pour out a good 2 inches or so and then fill it.
With the antifreeze?
Yeah.
So where did she hide the antifreeze? You said she hid it in the house. Okay, so where in the house did she hide it?
Oh, I know in the old house she had it under the sink, but...
In a turkey baster, you said?
Yeah. I'm not sure where she would have it in the new one, because the only thing that was under the sink in the new house was cat food, so I don't know where
You don't know where she was keeping
putting it, no.
Did you ever see the antifreeze? The
No.
bottles of it? You never
saw?
saw?
In the old house I did, but not
in the new house. Because there was a bottle of antifreeze right out in the open in the garage for anybody and their brother to see at your house.
Okay.
You're saying you never saw that bottle?
I wasn't aware of it there, but...
Okay. So you're saying that at the old house you knew she kept it in a turkey baster under the sink. And when she would, your quote is, when she was doctoring the drinks, she would pour some of the drink out and then she would put the antifreeze in the drink and then give it to your father? Mm-hmm. How often did you do that?
Rachel insists that she only helped with research. The poisoning was done by Diane's hand alone. This question assumes otherwise, and Rachel won't pick up on this. Snared in the same trap Diane fell for, she freely admits to doctoring the drinks herself.
Once.
Only once? How many times did you do it, Rachel?
3-4 times.
Rachel's ever-changing answers show McAmis has barely scratched the surface of her complicity. Diane confessed she urged her children to end their lives, expecting such a horrible act would satisfy McAmis's investigation. Rachel drip-feeds information to the detective in the same vein, hoping he'll be appeased before she admits the full truth. McAmis's persistence seems an effective counter, so he'll ask the same question until her answer remains consistent and, with luck, truthful.
It was a trade-off. She would do it, then I would.
And what would you put the antifreeze in? What kind of drinks?
Coke.
You put it in Coke?
Mm-hmm.
And what'd your mom put it in?
Gatorade.
How often did you do this?
Like once a day.
Once a day? For how long?
Several weeks.
Several weeks? Mm-hmm. How much would you put in?
Not much, just like, say you have like that size of Coke bottle, that much.
Okay. Would you do it once a day and your mother do it once a day, or would you do it once a day? How would that work out?
Whoever was there.
So whoever was there, so it could have been done multiple times a day.
Yeah.
Did it happen multiple times a day?
Probably, yes.
Yes or no? You know?
Yes.
It did? Okay. But how many times a day were you doing this, putting the antifreeze in your dad's drinks? How many times on average per day were you doing it?
Twice.
On average twice?
On average.
Or on average more than twice?
On average twice daily.
Okay. And when would you do that?
Like morning.
You would do it in the morning? And when?
And then evening.
So you would do it once in the morning and once in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
When would your mother do it?
Afternoon.
When would Sarah do it?
I don't recall Sarah doing it, though. She was in on the discussions, but I don't believe she actually was giving any of the drinks.
How often did Sarah give the drinks to your dad?
Without her knowing it, possibly once or twice a day as well.
Without her knowing it? What do you mean without her knowing it?
Mom would hand her a drink, go give this to Dad.
But Sarah knew what was going on.
Yeah.
She was involved in the plan to kill your dad. Okay.
McAmis is doubtful about Sarah's involvement. If she knew of the plan to kill Mark and Sean, surely she understood the drinks were poisoned. But the detective moves on for now, perhaps realizing Rachel has little reason to protect the sister she's just tried to kill.
And you said this took several weeks before your dad finally got sick? When you guys first started giving him all this antifreeze in the drinks and he wasn't getting sick, what was being said?
It would take time.
That's what your mom said?
Yeah, to build.
So it would have to build up in his system over time?
Mm-hmm.
So you guys knew it wasn't going to be an immediate deal?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a prolonged, after a few weeks, and then finally he started to get sick. And when he got sick, how often did you guys continue to give him the antifreeze?
Like once daily.
Only one time daily?
Well,
or
for
more
me
than once?
Personally, one time daily. I don't know how much Mom would have, because I think they overlapped. Because I know by then Mom would up the dose, like she would do half and half, really close to the end.
Okay. How many bottles of antifreeze did you guys go through?
I don't know, because she would get rid of the empty ones. So, upwards of 5.
So for your dad?
Yeah.
You went through about 5 bottles, and how big were the bottles?
After hours of questioning the remarkably stubborn Diane, McAmis is no doubt refreshed that a much clearer picture of these crimes is emerging. Diane claimed she wanted their lives to end quickly and painlessly, but Rachel says her mother knew antifreeze poisoning takes time. Diane swears she had a change of heart and stopped Mark's dose a few teaspoons a day, though by then it was too late. Rachel, on the other hand, describes her mother increasing the dose as Mark edged closer to death, eventually serving Coke bottles half filled with antifreeze, equivalent to 36 teaspoons. Where Diane said she used 1 to 3 bottles of antifreeze in total, Rachel reveals Mark alone consumed upwards of 5. But no matter how chatty Rachel is, McAmis can't become complacent. There are clear signals that Rachel still has something to hide.
Would you put the antifreeze in the drinks whenever you gave them to your dad, or how would that go?
She would mix them and then just pass them out.
When you say pass them out?
As in, go take one to Dad.
Okay. Did you ever mix them?
No.
Never?
Actually, there were a few.
Because I thought just a little bit ago you told me that you'd mix them also.
Yeah, but she put them in a smaller container. I confused myself.
So when you mixed the antifreeze into the drinks to give to your dad, where was the antifreeze at when you would do it?
Under the sink.
In the turkey baster or in the antifreeze bottle?
She had a small container that she had poured from the larger one into, and then keep the turkey baster with it.
Okay, and what
There's also a drawer too.
You got into the nicer house, the newer house, the better house. How did it go about with Sean then? How did the antifreeze stuff happen with him?
I don't know. Well, you said that she kept it in the garage.
I'm just saying we found some in the garage.
Okay. Because I knew she was mixing drinks, but I actually didn't mix those.
You did not mix Sean's drinks?
She already had those mixed and would just pass them along.
Where did she keep those drinks that were already mixed?
In the fridge.
How would you know not to drink them?
The top was open.
On what kind of stuff?
Like on Gatorade, the thing was already screwed open.
So that's how you and Sarah knew not to drink those?
Mm-hmm.
What about Brianna?
She typically doesn't go in the fridge for Gatorade. If anything, we bring stuff to her.
Okay.
This disregard for the safety of 9-year-old Brianna is worth keeping in mind for later.
So your mom had pre-mixed those drinks. Who else pre-mixed them?
Well, with Dad I helped, but with the other two, she pretty much did the mixing.
How often did you do the mixing for your brother and for Sarah?
Not as often. Like, maybe a drink a day.
Rachel doesn't hold her ground here as she did with the details of Mark's death, an indication that she's still lying. Pay attention to her pauses and the use of uncertain language like maybe and pretty much, and how McAmis calls out these signs of deception.
When you would mix the drinks at your new house, where was the antifreeze when you'd get it to mix?
It was already pre-mixed because Mom went ahead and mixed them and put them in the fridge.
You just said that you mixed them on occasion, though.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Hey, Rachel?
Sorry. She has, Mom has a container as well that...
Where's the container?
This is certainly one of Rachel's most glaring mistakes. Her dull realization comes from a failure to keep track of the lies she's told so far, proving she's still not being honest with McAmis. There's only one version of the truth, so a complete confession doesn't have room for slip-ups like this.
So when did the plan to kill Sarah come about?
May, June.
May or June. And so why was it decided to kill Sarah?
Other than the fact that she basically lived in the back bedroom and didn't, have any gumption to get a job, I'm not certain. Mom probably has her own issues with her.
What about you?
She's annoying, yes, but I don't know.
Rachel stated earlier that she didn't want Sarah to die, yet she doesn't echo this fact when asked why she wanted Sarah dead. It seems Rachel did want to kill her sister, but must invent a dramatic motive to justify this.
Did you guys fight a lot?
Yeah.
Your mother told me you guys fought all the time. Is that true?
Yeah.
Is that why you wanted Sarah gone? Why did you want Sarah dead?
Back in middle school, she would touch me. I mean, she grew up later when she got on the medicine, but she still argues. She still has really inappropriate jokes. She really had no purpose.
No purpose in life?
Not really, no.
Okay. When you say in middle school that she touched you, are you talking about she physically assaulted you, like punching?
Yes.
Okay. You're not talking in a sexual way. Or are you?
She did for a time, because we did share a bed.
Okay. And so you're angry at her for those past instances back in...
And it's like she can't remember.
Okay.
It's convenient that Sarah can't remember this accusation of sexual assault. Obviously, it's possible that Rachel isn't lying and that Sarah inflicted her little sister with a deep, unforgivable trauma. But Rachel will never return to this idea, not even during her trial. This suggests she's made up a shocking accusation to redeem herself in McAmis's eyes. Sensing as much, McAmis doesn't dwell on this topic.
So did Sarah ever become suspicious when she started to get sick?
She did mention, oh, am I going to die?
Mention that.
Like 2 or so days before we brought her to the hospital.
She never mentioned anything about, are you guys poisoning me too, or?
No.
But she asked if she was going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Who did she ask that?
Mom.
What'd your mom say?
I don't know.
Were you and your mom both giving Sarah drinks?
I wasn't actually aware that Mom was giving her drinks until she started throwing up, and then I kind of got suspicious.
Okay.
Rachel has just explained why Sarah had to die, yet now feigns ignorance about the plan to kill her. Bearing this contradiction in mind, McAmis drills her until he earns a consistent answer.
Because Sarah was in on the whole unscrewed cap, so I'm thinking Mom was getting a hold of her already open drinks in her room.
So Sarah was aware of the not to drink the ones that are already unscrewed.
Mm-hmm.
So you think your mom was getting a hold of drinks that Sarah already had open?
Yeah.
Did you ever give Sarah drinks with antifreeze?
I mean, Mom has had me go back and bring drinks to the girls, but...
Yeah. Did you know that there was antifreeze in the drinks that...
They weren't opened, though. So, I don't think so for Sarah.
Rachel, how many times did you give Sarah drinks that had antifreeze?
Not many.
How many is not many?
Like maybe 3.
Why did you not give her very many?
Because I figured Mom was doing the rest.
Had you guys been discussing it?
Mm-hmm.
Why were you... you were mad at her from your past fights and things, and you guys fought all the time now, and your mom said she just was a burden, she wasn't going to do anything, all she did was sit in the room, so that's why you were going to get rid of her.
Basically.
Who was next?
It stands out that Rachel didn't lower the dosage because she wanted her sister to survive, but because she assumed Diane was taking care of the rest. Yet somehow, the depths of Rachel's loathing remain hidden until another diary was confiscated upon her arrest. Unfortunately for McAmis, his interrogation with Rachel would bleed over to the following day.
Rachel, if you'll seat right here for me. A little tired, huh? Well, I'm here to talk to you just a little bit more, and just a few more questions about everything that's going on, okay? Was Harris hesitant initially because you said she was kind of in shock? Was she hesitant at all, or did she just agree with you guys and say, yeah, we got to do this? Because I guess, did she have a hatred for your dad as well?
She was extremely hesitant. Very afraid of death, too, because she would always, talk about not wanting to die.
Mm-hmm. And I know I asked you about that before, but whenever she started to get sick, did she not start to get paranoid about, hey, maybe they're doing this to me as well?
I know she kept asking, am I going to die? Or am I going to die soon?
Who would she ask that to?
Whoever was in the room.
While she was sick?
Yeah.
What would you guys say to her?
I told her I don't know, because I don't know when.
You didn't know how long it would take?
No.
Okay. Do you think she had an idea, though, at that point that you guys are poisoning her?
It wouldn't surprise me if she knew.
Why do you say that?
I mean, it was very similar to the way that Dad and Sean were going.
Right. Did she seem scared? Because, you said she had talked about being really afraid of death and not wanting to die. Did she ever mention anything about that? Or I know you said she was asking, am I going to die or am I going to die soon? Did she ever say anything more about her fears of death?
Yeah.
She did? What'd she say?
She didn't want to die. She didn't want to... That there were things she wanted to do before she died.
Like what?
Like go to France. Mostly travel things.
Mm-hmm.
As though Rachel had any morality left to spoil, her sister's intense fear of death stirred no reluctance to smother Sarah's dreams and goals. Of course, they did eventually take Sarah to the hospital, but there was no ambition to save her life.
Let me ask you this. Why did you guys, because I've spoken to your mom about this, and I'd like to know why you guys eventually took, when Sarah got so bad, I know you guys said you thought that she was pretty much dead, but why did you take her to the hospital?
I didn't want another one to die in the house.
And why is that?
Because houses are nasty after somebody's died in it.
Okay, and what does that mean? What do you mean by that?
I get a lot of nightmares. Like after Sean died, I moved into his room and it was awful, awful, awful in there. I kept feeling things in there. I just didn't want that again.
Okay.
Just as Diane explained in her final interrogation, Rachel didn't want Sarah to die in the house because houses are nasty when someone has died in it. There was no fear of divine or judicial punishment, only of the ghosts of their victims. This seems absurd given the material threat of a life sentence, but Rachel's erratic movements and crude, repetitive speech suggests genuine panic. We can look to her journals for a clearer view of this mindset and the dread she felt sleeping in Sean's room the night after he died. Yet I feel your gaze lingering over me. I close my eyes and try not to think of the ghosts of copper and bleach. On my tongue, I try not to think of shuddery breaths or how easily a soul evaporates, leaving nothing behind but a hollow husk, curled up on the floor, eyes vacant and dull, arms extended. But what were you reaching for? This is a haunting image of how Sean's body was found, rigid on the floor with blood drying on his mouth. Rachel's trauma might earn her some sympathy, but don't forget, it was fear, not mercy, that landed Sarah in the hospital.
So you didn't want her to die in the house. And you guys, explain to me why you waited to the point you did to bring her to the hospital. Was it just like you said, you just didn't want her to die in the house? Did you want her to die in the hospital instead?
Yeah.
Okay. Your mom had said something to me about you guys didn't want her to die in the house because of kind of a ghost experience. Is that kind of what you're talking about when you say you get these feelings?
Yeah.
And you didn't want that again?
No.
Okay. Were you surprised when you found out that Sarah was going to live?
Very.
Very surprised? And what did you think about that then whenever you found that out?
A bit surprised, but then it's like, okay, so she's gonna live.
Disappointed would be more accurate than surprised. Diane and Rachel weren't indifferent towards Sarah's life. She would have died in the hospital if their plan went off without a hitch. According to the diary seized upon Rachel's arrest, Sarah was as good as dead.
While we're on the topic of journal stuff, I guess after we arrested you, when we had to search your purse, we found your new journal entry, some of the stuff that you'd written in there, and I've got some of that talking about how you felt, kind of bad about Sarah's pain because you helped basically put her in the position she was. And so did you feel bad then? Because you wrote that you felt a little bit bad about knowing that you helped put her in that much pain. So did you feel kind of bad about that, or?
It's harder when you're watching in the ER. She would scream out. I don't like screaming.
Okay. So that was harder. It would have just been easier for you if she just would have died and not having to see all that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you wrote a little poem at the end of that. Do you remember that? How did that poem go?
I read about the nurses a little bit.
Right.
And it's like, they make you feel stupid.
Mm-hmm. You remember at the very end of that writing what you wrote about?
Something to the effect that I know what's happening.
Something like this. It said, once upon a time there were 6, now there are only 3. Only the quiet ones are left. My mom, my little sister, and me. When did you write that?
A little bit after she was put in the hospital, when she was still on the ICU floor.
You still thought she was going to die at that point?
Yeah.
Okay, because you said you were really surprised that she pulled through.
Mm-hmm.
Do you regret not waiting a little bit longer before you guys took her?
If it would have been a little less painless, yeah.
So you still want her to die then? Yeah.
Even now, exposed for her crimes, and with Sarah miraculously recovering, Rachel still wants her sister dead. With something so dark laid bare, Rachel sees no point holding back her most shameful secret.
But you guys didn't have any plan to do anything to Brianna? That was never discussed? Or was she next?
I'd rather her just go to somebody else.
You just want her to go to somebody else? You guys didn't talk about killing her? No? Rachel? When were you guys gonna kill Brianna?
Sometime after Sarah.
So what was your eventual goal? I mean, what? Just tell me, why did you and your mom want to kill everybody else?
As far as Dad, it was for a little peace.
Okay.
If we take Diane and Rachel at their word, Mark was a violent drunk, which opens the floor to sympathetic motives like self-defense. But Rachel's journal suggests even her hatred for her father had petty roots. There are no mentions of physical abuse. On the contrary, she writes that he'd rather cut off his own arm than hurt us. An entry penned while Mark was dying mentions Diane hates the person Alzheimer's made him, calling into question whether Mark even had control over his behavior. But this doesn't deter Rachel from writing he's more of a hindrance alive than after he was gone, and narrating his death like he's some distant villain. His bare feet were twitching through the door crack on the floor, and paramedics clumped in the hall pumped his chest in search of life, only to squelch up what I already knew, that ding-dong, the witch is dead.
Sean, because he was annoying and...
Okay.
Sarah was just very nosy, very nosy.
Okay. And what was the reason for Brianna?
Because I know there's no way in hell I'd be able to take care of her. I can't take care of me. So how could I ever take care of her? I don't want her to go.
So why did your mom want to kill Brianna?
Don't think she ever told me, but if I had to guess, it'd be very similar to Sean.
And that was?
That she was a burden.
A burden? Okay.
The flimsy motives turn to annoyance with Sean, then shrink to Sarah being nosy, until finally the logic of killing Brianna is that they simply don't want to take care of her. The pain suffered by Mark, Sean, and Sarah is undeniably tragic. But there's some small comfort in the fact these women were caught before they could annihilate an entire family.
Did you guys talk about how long you were going to wait after Sarah died before you killed Brianna?
We didn't get that far.
Didn't get that far? Were you ever worried you were going to get caught?
Yeah.
Did you guys ever talk about it?
No.
No? You never talked about it? But you worried about it?
I did worry about it.
And why did you worry about it?
Because I've seen, like, the TV court cases for people who've killed their families, and it's like ridiculous how people get into watching that kind of thing. I didn't want to become one of them. I just want to be left alone.
Unfortunately for Rachel, the press aren't going to shy away from a story about serial antifreeze poisoning. Her diary entries, confession, and life sentence are outlined for the world to see on the Staude Family Murders Wikipedia page. A rare dishonor she shares with the likes of Alec Murdoch and Russell Williams. Sarah's fate, on the other hand, is hazy. Rachel and Diane never gave a steady account of her involvement, so McAmis needs to hear the truth straight from the horse's mouth.
All right, Sarah. So, do you remember me at all from the other night when I came in here? You were pretty tired.
I'm just tired.
Just tired? So, Sarah, let me tell you this. We found out a lot of stuff. Okay. Over the last several days, we've been working on this case. Somebody called us and told us that you were real sick. So we started to investigate why you got so sick. Okay? And what do you think we found out?
I just don't know.
You don't know?
No.
No idea at all?
No.
Do you think anybody would try to hurt you?
No.
You don't think so?
I tend to be forgetful.
Okay. Would you be surprised if somebody tried to hurt you?
No.
You wouldn't be? Who would you think then, of the people you know, who would you think might try to hurt you?
No one.
No one? But you said you wouldn't be surprised if somebody did?
Maybe.
Okay. Who would that be?
Unlike Rachel's fumbles, Sarah's contradictions are likely fallout from the antifreeze poisoning.
Can you look at me, Sarah? We already know what happened to you.
All I know is that I got sick.
That's right. You got real sick. Sarah, I hate to tell you this, but your mom and sister have admitted to making you sick. What do you think about that?
Maybe it's best if I stop taking medication.
Sarah, how does it feel, or how do you think whenever I tell you that your mom and sister had something to do with you getting sick? What do you feel about that?
I feel surprised.
Surprised? And why are you surprised?
Because you told me that.
Uh-huh.
This is a fair point. Sarah didn't really react when McAmis told her who was responsible. There's no surprise or sense of betrayal, whilst even Rachel mustered a convincing reaction to Diane's confession. But Sarah's condition makes it impossible to analyze her words and behavior as we have with her aggressors. The strokes and seizures inflicted by antifreeze caused irreversible brain damage, forcing her to relearn even walking and talking. She'll rely on a state-appointed guardian for the rest of her life, and her eroded mental capacity means McAmis can't hold any lie, mistake, or confession against her.
What if they told me that you knew about him as well?
I guess.
Okay, that's understandable. Did you know about their plans to hurt them?
Yeah,
You did?
because I looked in that one journal.
Because you found it in the journal.
Yes.
That's right. Do you understand when I tell you that your mom and Rachel have both admitted to killing your dad and brother?
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
I'm shocked.
You're shocked?
Yeah.
And how do you feel that your mom and sister have both admitted to trying to kill you?
I was very shocked.
Okay. How do you feel when I tell you that your mom and sister also both admitted that you were involved in helping to kill your dad and brother?
Shocked.
And why do you say that?
Because I don't usually murder people.
You don't usually murder people?
No.
Okay. Did you ever help your mom and Rachel give anything to your dad and brother?
No.
Never?
No.
And what if they told me you did?
They would have been arrested too. Brianna would be sent to foster care.
Okay.
It's possible that Sarah protected Diane and Rachel out of fear she'd splinter her family between prison and foster care. Alongside the threat of being harmed herself, this is the same overpowering fear that traps people in domestic violence, abusive relationships, and even cults. There was no way to prosecute someone in this position, but Sarah did play a role in her mother's sentencing with a victim impact statement. "I forgive Mum for what she did to me. Not only did she take away my dad and brother, she also took away my livelihood and my independence. I prefer to be a survivor than a victim. I forgive them for what they did, because forgiveness is the right thing to do."